what you love to hate. Shake 'em up like a quake. Pop your feelings and turn and dispose 'em like haters I throw away. I'm forever blessed. Got the spirit that's wholly controlling me. I ain't gotta coordinate. I just sit back and buckle my bills and I'm ready to blaze in the stars of my destination. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. Melted broadcast, open vision. What's going on, everyone? This is Tony Mars with the Melted Broadcast, and today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Curtis Jones, a Bigfoot witness of not one, but a family of three when he was just 15 years old. So with that being said, welcome to the show. What's going on, Curtis? So today we're going to be talking about your 1983 standoff with Bigfoot himself. So let's get this ball rolling, brother.
My name is Curtis Jones, and I've got a twin brother, and we're the oldest of four kids. Me and my brother were born in 1968. So we grew up through the 70s and through the 80s. And now the town of Wairika, we just happened to move to Wairika from all of the other traveling we've done throughout our childhood. We lived all over in various, many towns, actually. We're pretty low income, actually. My dad was just a cook. So he had to feed the family of six. And so we didn't stay in any town more than a year, and we were jumping from school to school throughout our whole childhood. We lived in between California and Oregon, basically, in between both of them, just back and forth. And so, anyways, like I said, we grew up through the 70s there. My whole childhood, we were living in Oregon most of the time. We were born in California, but and my family lives in California, but my mom met my stepdad, and we ended up living in Oregon for most of our childhood. And my dad was a cook.
What kind of cook was your dad? Was he like a professional chef or?
No, he was just a short order cook. We just working in mom and pop restaurants type of deal.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I love me a good mom and pop restaurant.
Yeah, so we just, like I said, we just bounced around. We lived in a lot of towns, all up and down through Oregon, along the coast, along California coast. So I've lived in many towns. We came to Wairika from Oregon, and that was the year of 1983. That was in the summer, around July.
Wairika, can you tell us a little bit about that place? I know back in the 80s, there was, I guess that place was known for like a lot of Bigfoot sightings and like paranormal activity.
Yeah. And of course, I'm only 15 years old at this time, so I didn't know any of that type of stuff. Like I said, in the 80s, we didn't have the technology that we have now. We didn't have the YouTubes, we didn't have no internet, no cell phones, stuff like that. So yeah, but the town of Wairika is located right in the middle of the state, basically, right along the Interstate 5, which runs all the way up from Mexico all the way up to Canada, basically, to Oregon and Washington. And Wairika is actually about 20 miles south of the Oregon-California border. And it's also on the east side of the Klamath National Park. Or forest, the Klamath National Forest. And there's a whole mountain range out there that connects right to the basically to the coast, But there's millions and millions of acres of nothing but just total dense forest.
Yeah, the perfect roaming area for Bigfoot or any other creatures that we haven't discovered yet.
Well, yeah, definitely. And speaking of Wairika, it only had a population of about 3,500, but it was kind of spread out too, a lot, So it wasn't like highly congested. And like I said, during the summer of 1983 there was a drought going on too. So it was like the temperature was exceeding 110 degrees.
Oh wow!
It's kind of like a high plains area. It was kind of flat up on top of it. The elevation was about 3,500. On top of that, you got of course, the mountain range right there, the the Klamath National Forest.
Yeah, so the Klamath National Forest, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I had did some research on it, and man, there's some pretty crazy stuff that goes on over there. I was telling you the other day about that group BFRO, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization,
Yeah.
where they were finding like Bigfoot steps, I guess like birds that were like disembodied and owls, and apparently it's known for having evil spirits and something called folk charms, which I was telling you about, which are like a malevolent Russian style charm made of bird skulls, woven twigs, and like animal bones. I don't think that's a forest I'd really like to walk around.
Even with that being said, I never even heard about the spiritual stuff going on. I've only heard about the Bigfoot stuff. Um, as far as through my history of trying to trying to do my own research, figure out where, about the Bigfoot stuff. But part of that mountain range is it's connected to a lot of other national forests, and one of those national forests is a little bit further. It's basically southwest of Wairika, right along the coastline, where you have the Six Rivers National Park. Now that's where Bluff Creek is located. And if anybody knows anything about the Bigfoot in the Bigfoot world, and they know that about the Patterson Gimlin film, which is the most famous and the very start of the Bigfoot craze back in 1967, where Roger Patterson was doing an expedition, and he was out there looking for Bigfoot. He was out for 10. He was out there for like 10 days in the
Oh
deep
wow.
forest, and that's along Bluff Creek. So that's the most famous footage of the Bigfoot back in 1967. And like I said, I was born just a few months later when that happened, so I didn't get to experience that first rush of the Bigfoot stuff.
Is that the one that you're telling me about where the Bigfoot was walking across the field?
Walking across the Bluff Creek.
Okay, Death Creek.
Bluff Creek is the name of the area that this particular Bigfoot was actually. And they call it Patty. Patty is the Bigfoot. But that's what all of all the researchers they kind of go back to that particular moment, and they've been all the researchers have been looking at that footage and dissecting it, and trying to figure out if they think it's real or not. There's a little bit of controversy over that, but if you look at that footage, you can definitely tell. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely a real Bigfoot. And basically, Wairika is only as the crow flies, that Bluff Creek is only maybe like 70 miles from Wairika. Even though it takes about 3 hours to get there from Wairika, because you have to take this mountain road, the 96. A lot of those turns you have to go like you're only allowed to go like maybe 10 to 15 miles an hour. Just get around some of those curves, because it's pretty curvy road.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So that's all part of the big mountain range there. And it's thick forests too.
So you're just next door of the apartment complex where your aunt resided. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. So, first of all, let's go back to where we came to Wairika, and we were dropped off at my aunt's place, which is in a apartment complex. Because my mom and dad, they just dropped us off there because they were moving on to go search around California. They were gone for a couple of months, so we were left there. Being taken care of by my aunt, and she was located right next door to the elementary school. It's called Jackson Street Elementary School, and that's only about a couple blocks away from the actual bottom of the mountain range right there. There's definitely some community right there. It wasn't didn't have a high population of residents living right where I was at, but it wasn't congested at all. We did have some. There's definitely some neighbors and stuff right there. The school was like just on the north side of the apartment complex. And to get to the school, if you want to get into the school, all we had to do is go around the other side of the apartment right there on the west side. And there's no fence. There was no fence that separated the two property lines. We just walked right straight into the field. to get to the school. And I only mentioned the school because this is actually the location that we had our Bigfoot encounter.
Yeah, I actually looked up the school and I got some pretty good pictures, and it's kind of cool because as you told me your story the other day, I'm looking at the pictures, and like you could see the scene, you can see the mountains in the back, the little chain fence. I mean, I think you told me that it's been like upgraded and stuff now, but I mean it's still pretty cool to read your story and look at those pictures, and just kind of think about it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button.
So, and then let me say also, just on the south side of the apartment complex is another road called Evergreen Lane, and that leads right up to the cemetery, which is like I said, it's only about a block or two away. And that's the path we would take when we finally figured out how to get up onto the top of the mountain. You have to walk through the cemetery. So we just take Evergreen Lane right straight through the cemetery. You cross over a fence, and then there's like a pathway that just goes right straight up. And it's pretty steep right there. So it took about an hour or so just to get to the top of the ridge.
Oh
Where
wow.
we can shoot across. You can shoot across to the north and you can oversee the town. At the top of that ridge, you can actually, it's all wide open. And you can actually see the school, you can see the apartment complex just looking straight down, basically. And everything's open up. You can see the whole town. You can see the whole Interstate 5. And then you can also see off in the distance, you can see Mount Shasta, which is about 40 miles southeast of Wairika.
That's pretty cool.
So, like I said, after that whole incident, it took about a year before we finally figured out how to get to the top of that ridge. But anyway, that was my fun. That's when you're standing up on that ridge, you can just imagine yourself being a Bigfoot, looking straight down and looking at the school kids. So they can see they have plenty of. And you wouldn't be able to spot the Bigfoots because it's too high up, anyways. For someone down in town to be able to see anything walking up on the top of that ridge,
Yeah, but I've also heard these things like they could cover ground like within freaking seconds.
Oh yeah, and right there at the top of that ridge is very steep, so there's no humans that's going to be able to just go up that steep grade right there. That's why you have to go through the cemetery to get up to that point, So, but as far as Bigfoot's concerned, they could probably come right down that ridge probably with no problem and get back up. Basically, when we first moved to town in the first place, we were just there. We were there. It was about a week or so after we got there when this happened, and we didn't know anybody in town because, like I said, we just got there. We never been to that town actually. We only stopped there to get gas anytime we were going back and forth to Oregon or whatever our traveling. So we didn't know anything about Wairika. So we didn't have any friends. We didn't know anybody there. My aunt had only lived there maybe a year or so before we got there and I dropped off. So we met up with some neighborhood kids. We had there's another two brothers. There's a couple twin brothers actually, but they were fraternal twins that we met up with. And then we had another guy that lived pretty right there in the neighborhood. Actually, he was just a couple years older than me and my brother. Now we have a younger sister who's just 2 years younger than me and my brother, but she ended up being having that boyfriend, the kid that was with us. So that was him.
And you guys decided one morning, hey, let's get together and head up to the school.
Yeah. We were basically what happened is that it was in the evening time. It was super hot. It was over 110 degrees out. So we stayed indoors pretty much most of the day. We'd only go step outside for momentarily or whatever. But it wasn't until the evening time when we decided to do most of our socializing and stuff. So now we have the two brothers. They come over. We were expecting them. It was after dinner. It was probably 7 or so, 8, maybe 8 o'clock at night when they showed up. And then we had my sister and her boyfriend was there. And so we all decided the two brothers decided they wanted to play hide and seek. Now this, of course, a childhood game and stuff. And
Yeah.
Like I said, we didn't have computer games and all this.
Yeah, PlayStation, Xbox, none of that stuff.
We had to, we just came up with that and we ended up playing a game of hide and seek. So now, like I said, this is already in the evening. It was starting to get dark. Now we had our teams already made up. On my team, I ended up because me and my brother ended up having to be the captains because they didn't want to have kind of the twins be on the same team. They thought
Yeah.
that we had some kind of like a psychic ability or something like
Yeah.
that. Or
Telepathic communication or something.
yeah. So everybody wanted us to be on separate teams. So me and my brother were the captains. My team ended up being my sister and her boyfriend, and then my brother had the other two brothers on his team.
Okay.
So for my team, I won the coin toss. So we got to go lead and from after the apartment complex. So my brother had to his team had to count down from 100, while my team ran off to go hide. Basically, the rules was that we had to stay within the school property, and then the property on the west side of the fence that was on the west side of the school was like there's an 8 foot chain link fence, and then it just stopped over at the property line of the apartment complex. Also, it just stopped right there. But the fence from the whole western perimeter of the school was an 8 foot chain link fence. So we had to stay within that, and we could also be on the other side of that fence also, because on the other side of that fence was nothing but a undeveloped property that was owned by the city, and it covered quite a few acres. So there's no houses right there at all. And the only house you can see is just it was closer to the mountain range there. Now my team ended up over on that very far corner of the northwest corner of the school where there's a baseball diamond. Yeah, so right there, the baseball diamond right there is right there next to. There's a smaller fence that runs right along the northern perimeter of the school, and then so we got there. We were laying down right next to the right behind the baseball diamond. Then my brother's team, after they counted down to 100, they just jumped over. They just went over to the other side to this by the school also, but they were right next. They were pretty close to that corner of the school, just right on the other side of the apartment complex.
Yeah.
So they're on the south. So they're on the south, basically the southeast edge of the perimeter there. Now, in between the apartment complex and the school, there's like a little access road for the maintenance workers, and there's some buildings right there also for the school maintenance crews. So it was kind of dark right there. So then right behind the school there's a playground, for the kids. Like I said, there's grading like 1 through 5 or 6 or whatever it was for the elementary school, but there's lights right there also for so when the sun goes down, it was lit up right there a little bit. There's also some street lights also, but now here it's me and my brother. My brother's team is laying down right there, just looking straight. They knew exactly where we were at, though. They were looking right straight at the baseball diamond where me and my team were.
Yeah.
We were down as well. But I call it hide and go seek. But even though it really turned into being like just playing guns, because really, because my brother's team was supposed to come looking for us, then we're supposed to just start blaring away with our fingers, basically, just go bang, bang.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a well planned out type of a game. It was kind of like a hide and go seek / guns, I guess you'd call it. Basically, what happened is it was already at this time. It was probably getting pretty close to about 9 o'clock at night by the time we started this game and stuff. Now, to set up the situation, it was like it was very bright out. It was very, like I said, there's no wind, no nothing. It was just completely clear, and you could see the billions and billions of stars in the sky. So it was kind of lit up pretty good. It gave us pretty good ambient lighting.
Yeah.
Still see pretty good. You can definitely see shadows. You can see silhouettes or whatever you got going on. I could see the apartment complex from where I was at. I can see, if there's anything around, I can definitely see what's going on. There's lights also at the apartment complex. Lit up the area pretty good. So I guess I can start with my brother's team first. They were the first ones that actually came in, not in contact, but they came in the visual contact, I guess, with these 3 creatures. They were sitting there, we were all laying down. We were there for about 5 minutes or so at least. And my brother's team, and I was behind the baseball diamond across the field. I was actually getting ready to doze off. I was getting kind of tired just sitting there. Now my brother's team, they were there, and then they were just contently looking at towards our direction. And then all of a sudden, basically, these three figures came walking. They're coming from the side of the schoolhouse. They're in the shadows there. There's no lights at all on the side of the school. So we don't know exactly how long they had been there or whatever, but the three figures started walking right straight towards the chain link fence, basically, which is, quite a few yards you had to walk to get over there because you had the big open field, which also served as a soccer field.
Did you guys or anybody on your team have eyes on your brother's team whenever those
No.
creatures were approaching?
Well, my team, we didn't know where my brother's team was because the last time we seen him was at the apartment complex. So we were looking towards the apartment complex ourselves, but we didn't have a clue what the other team was at anyways. But even though my brother's team was right there, they were laying down, which I didn't know about until later. That's why I didn't know exactly what I was looking at either at the time. Those three images were walking. This team started walking right in front of my brother, and they were only about those Bigfoots were only like 75 feet or so from where my brother and his team were laying down. When my brother and his team seen these creatures walking in front of them, they automatically already knew what they were looking at. They had that good of they could see exactly what they're looking at. They could definitely see how that they're hairy. They didn't have no clothes on, and they're walking. And the way they're walking with very wide strides, I guess you say, like 5-6 foot strides.
Yeah.
And they're probably walking about, maybe 6 or 7 or so feet away from each other, so they weren't like right next to each other, but they were basically following each other right straight towards that chain link fence. Now, what my brother told me, they're at least 6 feet or more for sure. So that's why we kind of figured that they're probably either juvenile Bigfoots or they could have been young adults, whatever. One was actually bigger than the other two. The other two was just a little bit smaller, and for whatever reason, when they got to that fence, they kind of veered off.
And what made your brother think that the other two were maybe like child Bigfoots?
Well, yeah, like I said, they looked like they were a child, but they knew they were still pushing, pretty close to 6 feet tall. They weren't that much smaller than the bigger one. So that's why we're thinking that we don't know if they could have been the juvenile, and they have like maybe the female like parent or maybe an older sibling of the three. So that part's all kind of is still one of those things that we just have questions about ourselves. In other words, the bigger one was the more aggressive was the most aggressive out of the three that were there. So we ended up so my brother and his team watched these Bigfoots walk straight through the field, and my brother's team were just looking at each other, just kind of staring at each other, and they watched these creatures just walk all the way to it. Probably took about, they were probably watching for about 10 seconds, 10, 20 seconds or whatever. When these creatures got to the actual fence, it was the bigger one.
What's going on, everyone? This is Tony Mars with the Melted Broadcast. Like and subscribe on YouTube at the Melted Broadcast, Spotify, and the X at Tony Mars MB. And don't forget, stay melted.
When they got there, the taller of the three Bigfoots, all he did was just grab the hold of the top of that fence, which is about 8 to 10 feet tall. I think it was 10 feet, but it could have been between 8 and 10 feet, but whatever it was, this Bigfoot just grabbed the hold that fence and just yanked itself up and just threw itself over the other side of the fence.
Probably like nothing, just easy.
Yeah, there was nothing, because when I was on the other side when I was on that baseball field, when I was right next to the fence line, I didn't hear the fence rattle or nothing. I didn't hear no rattling, didn't feel no vibration of the fence or nothing like that.
So it could have just jumped clean over.
It could have, but my brother already told me that it actually, probably without it used its arms, and it probably could have reached over that in that aspect, yeah. So it probably didn't I'm just assuming he probably didn't even put his feet on the fence itself. You know what I'm saying? So it probably did grab a hold of that fence and just yanked itself over without making any without vibrating the fence. So now the other two, for whatever reason, maybe because they were too short, they couldn't grab a hold of the top of the fence or whatever. But they veered off down towards the property line of the apartment complex, and they decided to go around the fence that way. So that's what they did. But meanwhile, when they're doing all this, my brother and they're witnessing what's going on. This is going on for at least like a half a minute or so. They finally, my brother and them, they kind of, when they froze there in the first place, they were kind of scared, even though they know they were walking away from it. So now my brother and his team decided to retreat back into the apartment complex.
Yeah, I'd be pretty scared too.
They didn't want anything to do with it. Once my brother and them are out of the picture and thing, I can go back to where I'm at, where I can start off my part of the story. It would be a lot more scary than what my brother went.
Yeah, so your brother's team was the first witnesses of this, and then now you're seeing them.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm laying down behind that baseball diamond, the big fence thing, and then right behind me, right connected to the chain link fence is a man gate. So you can just walk through that man gate and you can be on the other side on that property. That we'll get to in a few seconds. But meanwhile, we're sitting there. I'm already dozing off a little bit because I'm getting kind of tired. It was like I said, it was like 9 o'clock at night or whatever. My sister nudges me, lets me know that she sees anyways, we saw 3 images go walking across the field. Automatically, we thought it was my brother's team. We weren't staring at it or anything, but we just stayed low. But we knew that there was three of them walking across the field. So there's no reason for us to get scared at this point because, as far as I was concerned, and my team, we just thought it was my brother's team. There's 3 of them. There's 3 of my brothers. My brother's team.
Yeah.
So that's basically where we are at that. So we just stayed there. We could still see them, on the corner of our eye. I could definitely see them walking across the field, and they were probably about 100 feet away from me and my team. So we didn't have a clear look. Plus, we were trying to stay low. We didn't want to get caught from the other team. Now we decided that we just wanted to get on the other side because we had a feeling we were going to jump over the fence or go around the fence or whatever. And either way, we wanted to have the element of surprise on our side. So even if they would have came down towards us on that side of the fence, if we put ourselves on the other side of that fence, we would be at least on that side. So if they would have came down that fence towards us, we would have been able to do our little fake gun type of thing, hit them, So we ended up getting ourselves on the other side. But as I was passing through the fence, I knew that they're already at the fence. And this is where I'm already touching the fence, and so I did not. I didn't feel nothing. I didn't feel no vibrations, so I didn't have any clue that they got on the other side of that fence at all until later. So we got on the other side of the fence, and on that whole property line. It's all pretty flat. It's not flat, but there's not a lot of brush or debris. There's definitely a lot of tall grass and weeds. A lot of rolling dirt mounds and a lot of pits and everything in the ground.
Yeah.
So it's not even. There's definitely scattered. There's some scattered trees, pretty much dead trees, just scattered throughout the whole piece of property and stuff. And there's also a lot of scattered like thick brush every so often you can see that you're next to. But anyways. So now, the weeds in the grass are about 3 feet high, 2 to 3 feet high. So, but now we're on the other side of that fence, and we decided we're gonna go ahead and crawl down the edge of that fence line, and we did it pretty slowly. We just kind of took our time. We stayed low. We kind of crawled all the way down.
Yeah. We
get down about halfway down, like I said, about 100 feet or whatever it was. Pretty much in the same area that we seen those images right there, the silhouettes, I guess you'd call them. So we got to the area where we thought they should have already been, that we should have already come across them already. So we didn't know. So now I'm figuring, okay, now where'd they go, So now we're figuring they walk down the other side of the fence. And now we decided that just fit right along that fence line. We just stayed there. We put our backs against the fence, looking towards the mountains, to the west. And there's some houses and stuff. There's some small community towards the west of this. Before you get to the mountain range there. So now we're just sitting there. We're sitting there for a few minutes, right? At least 2 minutes at that point, because my sister and her boyfriend decided that they were getting bored with the game already, and they decided they wanted to go out and go crawling out in the grass, whatever they wanted to do. I was kind of glad because they were kind of snickering and they kind of wanted to they were kind of be a little bit touchy-feely with each other.
Yeah, little lovebirds, young lovebirds.
I was actually more than happy to see that my sister and her boyfriend decided to go out in the grass. I just told them, okay, they're talking too much. And I just say, hey, okay, just get away from me. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to get out of here.
You're ready to take on the whole team by yourself, huh?
Yeah, I just figured at that point, I said, okay, let them make the noise so they could be the decoys for the other team to come and ambush them. While I could not ambush the other team, right?
Yeah.
And that was my mindset at the time.
That's awesome.
So they go crawling out in the grass, but meanwhile, I'm not really paying attention to which direction you're going, But they're still snickering, so I can still hear them. They get in the grass, and I can still hear them pretty good. So they didn't go very far, maybe 15, 20 feet out or whatever. But now all I'm doing is scanning. All I'm doing is scanning from looking down the south of the fence line, from that direction. I'll just scan. I'll just start turning my head kind of slowly and looking all the way down and scoping the whole perimeter of the whole property, and then looking down, towards the north part of that whole piece of property. And I did that quite a few times. And I was there for maybe about a minute and a half or so after my sister and your boyfriend went into the grass. As I'm scanning, like I said, about a minute and a half later, now I see these two images just sitting on a mound about 20 feet away from them. And they're sitting on the grass was tall right there. The mound was about probably 2 or 3 feet high. And then you got a bunch of roots and stuff around there. And then you got some thick shrubbery right next to them, basically on my left. And so there's some thick shrubbery there, but they're right there, pretty much kind of like wide in the open in front of me. They're kind of like off to the left a little bit from where I was at. It was just dark enough because the shrubbery right there was blocking a little bit. All you can see is I can see the top of their chest, even though it's still shadowy. All you see was like a silhouette in it. But these were silhouettes sitting there. But at this point, I thought it was my sister and her boyfriend, and because I can still hear them, snickering and laughing a little bit, So I kept telling them to be quiet. I'm looking at those two that were sitting on the mound there, and I kept telling them to be quiet. I kept raising my hand and telling them to be quiet. And that was going on for a couple of minutes right there. It's like, so my sister and her boyfriend was definitely close enough to where the way it sounded as if that was them sitting right there. So, and I wasn't afraid, I wasn't, as far as I was concerned, that was my sister and her boyfriend. But I did notice these two were just staring at me. There's no movement. They're like almost as still as being as still as being a statue or something like that. And meanwhile, all I'm doing is just go back and forth, looking from left to right. Just trying to find the other two. And so nothing was going on. And I still keep looking at them and stuff. But meanwhile, I decided not to even. I just kept hearing the giggling and stuff too. But so I just said, screw it. I'm just gonna just pay attention to what I was doing to see, just to find the other, look for the other. As I was actually coming from looking from the left, I was looking at the left, and now in the corner of my eye, I see something coming running around the backside of that big brush that was right there next to the other two that were sitting there, and it was about 5 feet behind those two, and they came running. It started me, but at this point, I'm just thinking it was just somebody from the other team, just at least one person. But this thing was running so fast and this is about 30 feet from me when I first seen it. So now this thing just came running around the other two, and then just made a beeline towards me. Meanwhile, I'm just going to the other team, right? I'm just thinking the other team. Now I started young as a teen, but even before I can get on my feet, this this creature actually stopped within 10 feet from me.
I know you told me that, growing up over there, or while you were over there, you saw a lot of animals, a lot of bears and things like that. So,
Oh yeah.
so with this thing, what was different in the behavior that you would expect from like humans or animals? Like, what stood out?
Yeah, well, first of all, we even have a theory of why they would be down there in the first place. But it was definitely something. It was definitely probably a lack of food and thing up the mountains for one thing. But what definitely distinguished these images from an animal, of course, they're bipedal for sure. You know, 2 legs. They had arms. They had fingers. I could see the fingers. And like I said, we already know the animals coming down. We didn't have bears coming down into town. We definitely had deers. We had coyotes coming down in the town. A lot of like rabbits and all that stuff too. So there's all kinds of wild animals that did come down into town. Mainly probably because of the water sources, wherever it's probably in there or whatever, up in the mountains. That was just one theory. But like I said, now these creatures that I encountered were definitely not an animal by any means. So yeah, I guess I continue with this part about him. At this time, I can't even tell. I can't even tell if it was a male or female. Either ways, because all I can see is a silhouette in front of me. But I can see, because the lighting behind him, I could definitely see the hair. I could see that it was hairy, and there was no clothes. I knew they didn't have any clothes on. There was no pants or anything. I could see it was definitely. I had quite a bit of ambient lights that I could see behind him, but I could definitely tell from the hair. It just went right straight down, and the hair just went right around the shoulders. And I didn't see a neckline of any kind. It just kind of flows like an nice easy flow of hair, just coming right straight down. And I can see the individual hairs too. But when that thing was stopped in front of me, I can see the individual hairs glistening from the light, from the beams of the stars.
Did it give off like any kind of smell? Because
No.
I know with like previous encounters, like people always like right before they see these Bigfoot, they always smell something like real bad.
There's definitely no smell. But then I come to find out that most of those claims are places near like garbage bin or like dumps and everything, and I think that's where they get their names from back east, like in Louisiana, wherever they're from. But they're like from the swamps and everything, and that's why they call them the swamp ape.
The
Because
swamp
they have
ape.
that smell. Yeah, the swamp ape.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's a term that they use in the eastern states, or the southern states or whatever. That's where that comes from. Up in the northwest, apparently, and I thought the same things. I know I've heard people say this, but I think come to find out, majority of those that experience that smell are coming from from the skunk ape.
Okay.
Which is the same species, but being from a different area. As a matter of fact, the Bigfoots that are encountered back east are supposedly a little bit smaller than the Northwest Bigfoots from where I was from.
I know we really haven't had too many here like in Texas, but I know there was a real famous one over in Galveston.
Yeah, well, there's that Boggy Creek, of course.
Yeah.
Whatever that name. You've heard the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek, right?
I have not.
Yeah, it's probably the same one. It's a famous one that happened back in like 1971 or something like that.
Okay.
They made a movie of it. It's called The Legend of Boggy Creek.
The Legend of Boggy. I'm not
The
checking.
Legend. It's called The Legend of Boggy Creek, and that was made in like 1971. And they actually used some of the townspeople, the people that actually witnessed the Bigfoot that was terrorizing the town. I can't remember the name of the town right offhand, but anyways, but that was right there somewhere right at pretty close to the border of I can't remember whatever. I know it's Texas, and then whatever state that is right there, New Mexico or something like that.
Yeah, we got New Mexico, we got Louisiana, up top we got Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think it was New Mexico. So wherever it is, and I think it was pretty close to Galveston or whatever, but I can't remember now. But anyway, so now back to the smell. Yeah, there's definitely no smell. Not to mention there's no wind in the first place. There's
Oh,
not,
yeah.
not a wind. This thing came running toward me. It was moving so fast that even before I get on my feet, but at this time, I think I must have gotten into a little bit of shock because my mind, I did not want to believe it was a Bigfoot because first of all, I wasn't like 100% believer at all because it was something I definitely knew about, but I didn't expect to see or have any kind of a Bigfoot interaction whatsoever. I was
Yeah.
looking at Bigfoot.
Especially that
It's
close
just
to you.
Oh yeah, I mean, and they're being in town too. So I'm just, even though I knew it wasn't human, but my mind wasn't letting me process the fact that it was a Bigfoot, right? So basically, but by the time I got on my feet, and I'm up on the incline already. There's a little bit of an incline before you get down to the property line, but maybe a couple feet, 3 feet or so. And I came down. I stepped down towards there to the bottom of that grade that I was at. So now I'm face to face, even though it was only about a 4 or 5 second type of a deal. I'm staring at him and it's staring at me. So now instead of me going into a fear, because I just went into more of a shock. So I just started blasting away. I just started using my fingers and I just started yelling out bang, bang, bang. Right?
That's awesome.
And I'm yelling at the top of my lungs because I still had adrenaline. I was still excited about trying to shoot something,
Yeah.
That's what we're there to do. But I was still shocked because the major shock didn't happen until just later. But here I am, I'm shooting, right? So now, as I'm blasting away, those other two that were sitting there by themselves, they stood up on that mound, and they're from where I was at, they look pretty tall, just looking at me. As I'm sitting there shooting bang, bang, bang at them, all 3 of those figures just turned around, and then they just started booking away from going towards the mountains. They started leaping through the grass and the weeds, and I could tell they're just leaping pretty high too. They're leaping pretty high. Now it wasn't until about maybe 30 or 40 yards down when they actually slowed down. And they just came to more of just a brisk walk. But meanwhile, they kept looking back at me, and I'm looking at them, very. When they started leaping away, I just started yelling out deer. I started yelling out deer just because I went into a shock because I knew it wasn't human, and I didn't know what else to say. All I knew was the words that came out of my mouth was just deer. I kept going deer, and I was yelling at the top of my lungs, even though I know for a fact that they weren't deer because they were on 2 legs and they were running away from me. It's just that I couldn't process what was going on. My mind just went into a total confusion.
So whenever the Bigfoot was right in front of you, you said it's about 10 feet in front of you. What was going through your mind those few seconds during this standoff?
When I was actually started my confusion and my, at that point, I guess I could still kind of feel, okay, is it human or what? I mean, I don't know exactly what I was thinking. I was still going into shock because mainly I got into shock at that point because I just seen the hair, and I know that my brother's team didn't have any kind of hair going around. They weren't wearing any kind of a jacket or anything. So I didn't know what to think. All I know is that I just started just blasting away out of the confusion, and then when they started running, that's when I just started yelling deer. Not because of the hair,
And what was the big?
That's how much the confusion I went into. I didn't know I just didn't know what to think.
And what was this Bigfoot like whenever it was right there in front of you? Like what was it doing?
When it got to me, all it did was kind of bow down a little bit, and it was kind of turned to the side a little bit, and it was like it had like a hunch. It was hunching down a little bit, like it was trying to communicate with me. It was curious with me. So there was no aggression whatsoever. So there was nothing for me to be afraid of because it was almost like he was trying to communicate with me without words, of course.
Yeah.
it was kind of like it was kind of like cowering. I don't know if it's called cowering down or whatever, but it was leaning down a little bit. The knees were bent. That was the part that I had to look back on and go, well, it just looked like it was trying to talk to me or it wanted to engage in some kind of interaction somehow, in some way. But at this time, my adrenaline was just shooting off all over the place where I just, there's nothing else for me to do but just start, I was playing the game and that's it.
Yeah.
And I felt bad later because after looking back and just thinking about what it was actually doing, like I said, when it was coming running at me, it wasn't coming to run at me to try to take me down or anything. It just happened to be running at an accelerated speed through all this, that whole terrain right there. Just nothing but just a bunch of lumps and everything. You could trip and hurt yourself if you tried to run through it. A lot of little dips and everything little ditches and everything. So for that thing to run that fast without a care in the world was pretty amazing also. But
So say this thing, you said that you feel like it was trying to communicate with you. What if it did? Like it literally communicated with you like telepathically. What would you have done, or how would you have reacted?
that can be a number of things. It depends. I mean, it depends on what kind of, if it is true, if they can kind of manipulate certain things or whatever, like make you paralyzed or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. If I would have been in the same thing in my mind, I probably still would have gotten a shock or whatever. I mean, telepathically, I don't know. I definitely wouldn't expect a verbal conversation or anything by any means. So the only way that there would have been any kind of communication would have been a telepathic type of situation, But it's just totally hard to even think of what I would have actually done. If it would have been just whatever, either way, I was in shock. If I would have recognized them as being victim, I would have been in deep shock. I probably would have had to go to a mental hospital or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that was the worst spirit that I've ever had in any interaction I've ever had with bears that I've had. I've had 5 different bear encounters because I've done a lot of hiking. I've done hiking and camping all my life. And no bear. And I've only had like 2 or 3 that actually came close enough for me to actually get scared to be that close. But yeah, if they were communicating with me, most likely I would have just been, I probably would have just been in a deep shock probably. But in this particular situation, when they were, like I said, they're about 30, 40 yards away already, and they came to like a steady stop, but they kept looking back at me. They kept turning. I could see them turning their torsos. Their legs were still going in that direction, but then about every 10 or so steps that they made, they'd just be looking back at me. I don't know if they were looking to see if I was chasing them or if they were just still curious.
Yeah.
Because once they already got that far, I already stopped yelling. And I'm just staring. I'm not saying anything. And then I noticed my sister and her boyfriend were standing right next to me, and I didn't even notice them walking up. I just noticed they were standing next to me while I'm still looking at these figures walking away. And my sister and her boyfriend, they could see the figures too. But by the time they got there, they couldn't recognize that it was a Bigfoot at this time because they're just a little bit too far away for them to make any kind of identification or anything like that. So now we're standing there, and I'm still in the daze. I'm looking down at the ground now, going. I'm just trying to get this stuff in my mind. What I just seen, I didn't know what I was looking at, and even at this point, I still didn't suspect it being Bigfoot. I wasn't even contemplating. I was just trying to figure out what other kind of creature it could have been. It wasn't until I heard my brother and his team were coming from the apartment complex, come running across the field to get to the fence where I was on the other side. So I can hear them yelling. So now I turn back around and I walk myself up to the top of where the fence was at. And I just grabbed a hold of the fence, in between the links, the chain link. And I can still hear my brother coming on. They're yelling, but I couldn't hear what they're saying. And I was still confused at this point. I was looking down the ground, and I'm just moving my head back and forth, right, and trying to process what I just went through. Because at this point, I still wasn't scared. I was just trying to figure things out. So now my brother and his team gets within like 10 feet or so from the fence. The one thing that came out, the one word that came out of the words that came out of my brother's mouth was that we just saw Bigfoot, right? So that was it. That's when I went into the most insane, most crippling, what do you call that? Almost like a paralyzed state
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking total fear. I'm talking the worst fear that you can ever even dream of. Even if I was to jump out, maybe if I was able to jump out of an airplane without a parachute, something like that,
Yeah.
I'll probably have the same type of fear of what I experienced at that particular moment.
You should have told
So,
him whenever he told you, we just saw Bigfoot. You should have been like, you just saw Bigfoot. I just saw Bigfoot.
But like I said, this is when I went into an actual total shock, and I couldn't even speak. I was in so fear. Matter of fact, everything went blank. I didn't know what happened after that until I was on the other side of that fence. Now my brother told me that he seen my face just go white, and I just grabbed hold of that fence and I just ripped over that fence like it was nobody's business. I just went and I threw myself to the other side with no fear of being hurt or anything. And like I said, this is an 8 to 10 foot high fence.
Yeah.
And granted, I was 15 years old. I only weighed 130 pounds, actually. I was actually in pretty good shape at that time. So it wasn't like I was in any fear of hurting myself. But yeah, it could have been, I could have gotten hurt if I would have twisted my ankle or whatever. Of course, I was in such a paralyzed state in my mind that I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
The next thing that ever came into my mind was after I was already on the other side of the field, and I can remember myself being on the ground. I was close to I was pretty close to the playground actually, and there was quite a few, it was definitely quite a few feet away from the fence, on the other side of the field there. So I was just on my hands and I was on my knees, and I had my hands over my eyes, and I was rubbing my face, and I had nothing but tears coming out of my eyes. That's how scared I was. I wasn't really afraid of it coming back at me, I guess. I was more afraid of just the fact that I was that close to something and not realizing it. I was almost being fooled to believe it was a human. But at the same time, I'm thinking that Bigfoot was, to me, was like just a imaginary creature. And then to come to find out it's actually real, it just put a total fear in my mind that I was standing that close to something that shouldn't even exist, basically, as far as I was concerned. So yeah, and it took me even after that, I was there for quite a while. I was there probably half an hour to 45 minutes before I could even come around, even to realize where I was at, what I was doing. Even though it took a while. I was there in tears, basically. And just to go to, even when right now, I'm not as bad. But when I used to tell my story up to this point, when I'm talking about getting scared, jumping over the fence and everything, I used to come into a visible shaking. I'd just be shaking, just trying to tell my story, And like right now, I've already told my story so much within this last year that it's a lot easier on me now. The years following that whole incident, I was, I only told a handful of people throughout the years. It wasn't until recently that I came out with even told my story. But anytime I did, I told the people that I really felt I was really, really close to, even though most of them didn't believe me anyways. But either way, I'll tell my story, and I'll be physically shaken up when I start talking about the actual. Cause when I'm telling my story, I'll be putting myself into the actual that time and space of what happened to me. Back when I was sitting there, like I said, I was there for like 45 minutes or so. But now we all decided, all of us, like I said, there's 6 of us total. Of course, you got me and my team, my brother's team. So now we decided to sit around in a circle, right? And I placed myself on the part of the circle facing that fence because I was still scared. I just figured, hey, I want to see if something comes over that fence. I want to be the first one to see it. So I positioned myself in that circle just because I was that scared of what was going on.
Yeah.
Let
So yeah,
everybody else be your shield.
it was just a little bit of security, and I felt a little bit more security because because there was 6 of us. But at the same time, I'm looking at the fact, okay, in my mind, I'm kind of devious in this aspect too. I think, okay, if something does go wrong, something over that fence, I know I'm faster than my sister, and I know I'm faster. I'm also faster than her boyfriend because he's kind of a clumsy guy. So to me, I think, okay, I've already got the upper hand. I see the first one gone.
Yeah.
And we weren't that far from the apartment complex, just right there. It's just that I figured, okay, I'm in a good spot right there. I wasn't even thinking about the safety of anybody else. I say, hey, I've already been close enough to where my safety is already at jeopardy. So why worry about anybody else?
When you guys regrouped with each other and you guys were kind of like, recounting what everybody saw, how did that conversation go?
Yeah. So basically, since I was still kind of, I was still just, I wasn't completely 100%. So I just listened to everybody else talking first. I let my brother tell his story, and my sister, and then they're telling their story. But my sister, of course, flat out said that, yeah, she didn't know it. They definitely didn't see what what I saw. But her boyfriend, I believe he got a little bit jealous of the fact of what I saw, even though they were probably just as close to this creature than I was, because they were right there in the grass, right, even closer than I was. So now the boyfriend, my sister's boyfriend, he decided to come out and say, "Oh yeah, I stood up and I was looking face to face with him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister even told him flat out, saying, "Don't." I mean, she just told me flat. She got mad. She was embarrassed for him. Because he's kind of a storyteller anyways. He was always kind of oddball of the group already.
Yeah.
So we let him talk. We already knew that he was full of bull. But anyways, so after he got done, we already shut him down as far as his story is concerned. But then, of course, my brother and his team, that's when I found out exactly what they saw. And there was definitely no reason for me to disbelieve what they told me because of what I saw either. It was like, I was already went through my situation. Now I want to hear from my brother's team. But when they told me that they can go back what they're looking at, I mean, there's not even a question of what they're looking at. From the get-go, they watched them. They physically watched these creatures walking in front and right in front of about 70, 75 feet, maybe at the most. The only distinguishing fact is that as these Bigfoots were walking in front of them, these Bigfoots didn't even acknowledge my brother's team at all. So now I'm thinking that they probably didn't even know that my brother's team was even there because my brother's team were just laying there. They were pretty still. They were just looking straight across the field. They weren't even talking to each other. And then they just see these figures walking across where they're laying.
Yeah.
And my brother's team was in the shadows anyway. So whether the Bigfoots have good eyesight or whatever, I don't know. But whatever it is, there was no indication that these Bigfoots even acknowledged my brother's team whatsoever at any point in time. So basically, all I got is what my brother told me and his team, and that's what kind of gave me the. Of course, I gave my story, of course, and of course, that's the same story I just told you. But it just gave me confirmation.
Yeah, that validation that I really saw Bigfoot. He was really in my face.
Yeah, it gave me the validation and confirmation that what I experienced was definitely different no matter what, even though I know. I mean, and then we sat around and tried to, just like one thing, you are trying to rule out, you want to rule out any kind of animal and just anything you can, rule out any prospect of it being a human. So that's what we did. We sat around and we compared each other's story, and you had to sit there and say, well, this is the reason why it can't be human. All the way from the fact that my brother and team already seen what they saw with no clothes on, they seen the fur, they seen the fur, the hair, whatever it is. And then the witness those Bigfoots, the one Bigfoot grab a hold of the top of the fence and then jump it and just leap over the other side. Okay, so they witnessed that. And then the fact that when I came into my situation where it came face to face with me and with what I saw, and I knew for a fact it had hair.
What color was the hair?
The color, it looked like it was either a dark brown or a blackish color.
Okay.
You
And
know,
I'm only asking that because later on I want to jump into a sighting in 1977, which there's a lot of similarities from what you're telling me.
well, and it comes down to how old that these creatures could be also, because I know like the younger ones could be a darker color. And then, there's different, there's somewhere that they hear they have like a reddish tint to their hair and all that stuff. And then, of course, you get older, they've been inspired to be gray like us, we get gray hair.
Yeah.
When the elders get old, So, but my situation, to me, it looked like it was definitely like a blackish color,
Yeah.
as if they were kind of young, whether they were juvenile or young adults is still, it's just one of those things that I'm never going to know, and I can't, and even being male or female, I'm not going to know either. They didn't make any sounds either. They didn't make any listening sounds, and that's another thing. So I'm thinking the reason why they're not going to come into the human territory and start doing their hooping and hollering like you hear in other claims. But those other claims, they're out in the middle of in the forest somewhere where you're actually invading on their territory.
Yeah.
And that's when they start doing their hollering and all that stuff. And you hear the sounds because they're trying to scare you away or whatever else, whatever else they do. That's why they make all those, like the tree knocking and all that stuff. They're probably trying to scare people away, just to warn everybody to stay away from their area, basically.
Yeah.
So with the evidence, like all these sightings and stuff like that, people find, Bigfoot footprints, and they make, those molds out of them. The pictures, some of the pictures, they're not too good. But how do you think Bigfoot has avoided detection for so long? And what do you think would happen if someone actually caught a Bigfoot?
I'm thinking because, well, first of all, most people don't realize how dense these forests are. People get lost in the forest. Let's put it this way, you can get yourself trapped somewhere in the middle in the forest, right? If you don't know what direction you're supposed to go, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of miles of nothing but dense forest. Matter of fact, even in the forest up above in that whole mountain range where I was at, there's areas that even human feet have never touched. People don't realize that how dense the forests are, and so that's the perfect areas where Bigfoot can actually hide out because they know for a fact that humans can never get up there, or if there is any humans that can get up there, they're going to be taking a big chance anyways. You have to be like a supreme athlete to get hundreds of miles into the deep forest, and to be able to survive, to have water, food, and to be able to cross through the thick terrain. We're talking about thick berry bushes and thick everything. Just everything's so thick, but most people don't realize that. The fact that they can't find, or for one thing, most likely they have found remains and bodies, like in the Mount St. Helens areas. They say the government has pulled away some bodies from the Mount St. Helens eruption. But of course, they're going to take that and they're going to hide whatever they got, for one thing.
Yeah.
So now the ones that are survivors, of course, I'm assuming that they have some kind of burial ground. Maybe not a burial ground, but they either crush up the bones or whatever they do with their bodies or whatever. But they either hide them deep in caves. Or,
Yeah, I was gonna say cave systems.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different things they can do, and these Bigfoots are big enough where they can actually cover a cave hole just by gusting. Moving a big boulder or something and in front of an opening, just so people can't just accidentally get up into the mountains and find their way inside the tunnels.
Yeah. So, what do you think would happen if someone actually caught a Bigfoot? And I'm asking because I'm thinking a lot of people would just try to kill him on sight. And I'm saying this because, so I was talking to one of my coworkers, that I was going to do this episode with you. And he had mentioned he was working in Montana, and there was this dude. He would dress up as a Bigfoot and like walk around the woods trying to scare people. And these two country
Yeah.
dudes saw it, crossing, I guess, like a walkway, and freaking ran it over. And it turned out it was a dude in a costume, and it actually came out like in the newspaper.
Yep. And there you go. That's kind of another good point right there, because if there was a lot of hoaxes going on, for one thing, you'll see a lot more people being killed, shot, or whatever, because people that are dressed up in monkey suits or whatever, they're not going to move that fast, so they're going to get caught anyways. So you don't hear a bunch of those people being out there doing that kind of stuff. You definitely hear about that, but with all those sightings, the thousands and thousands of sightings, you don't hear anybody being able to actually successfully kill a Bigfoot. Now, the one thing about even capturing a Bigfoot, I don't like the idea of catching a Bigfoot in the first place, because I already know I don't trust the government. I don't trust any of that. They're going to treat them like an animal, basically. They're going to put them in zoos or whatever. I don't know, depending on what they find out about it, whether they can teach them to talk or whatever. But they're going to study. I don't like the way the government, tries to hide stuff, and they'll take this creature away from its own family, and and make it appropriate, going through all these different studies and stuff.
Yeah, and then I would imagine too, probably cut it open, see like its organs and how it's set up, its brain, all that.
I can see them putting in the suit. Maybe not, they'll probably be humane about it, but I just don't like. I don't even like even the thought of them doing something like that. Especially with what I know. I already know that Bigfoot exists. That's why, as far as I'm concerned, it can stay doing what it's doing.
Yeah.
Because I don't. That's the thing. Because I'm looking at this creature as not being an actual animal. I'm thinking of it being as actually something that's smart enough that can actually understand you. It can probably learn to recognize our language. If it hasn't already, it might already know certain words or whatever, even though they may not be able to speak it. But, I think they're intelligent enough for all the years that they've been, because they've been coming close to schools and graveyards, whatever, family get-togethers. Bigfoot could be anywhere. Bigfoot could be right there in the tree line, right next to a family reunion, and could be doing this stuff for many, many years. And people just don't realize that Bigfoot is hiding right there in it's not in plain sight, but right there in, right next to him. You could be walking through the forest. You could be within 5 feet from a Bigfoot that knows exactly what he's doing. Be able to blend himself into the trees or the thick brush, and you don't know it.
Yeah, and talking about, like how far back they go, they probably, I don't know if you know anything about, the theory of the Anunnaki and them altering like the DNA. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, what if, say that's true, the Anunnaki did come down and mess with our DNA, the missing link, and there was this other group of, I guess, primates or whatever you call it, that are still in the caves, and they never got messed with, and through evolution, they just kept changing and altering and changing and altering, and then next thing you know, you got a Bigfoot, like the original from way back when.
Yep, exactly. That's kind of thing I thought about too. I figure that government does have that type of mentality. Just do the studies and then try to they're not even trying to create some kind of an army, some kind of an army that can defeat anything, just go out and for war or whatever, maybe trying to do anything, just genetically engineered some kind of an army for the government,
Yeah, Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, it's whatever, it's crazy. I was just saying, yeah, just the amount of things that can be possible in this whole the whole Bigfoot craze is just crazy. There's more and more people coming forward now since they've got the YouTube and all that stuff and everything else. Matter of fact, I seen that I just I started watching your podcast or your broadcast, whatever you call it. But and I see you did Linda Eastburn.
Yes.
So she was the very first person this last January. She was the very first podcaster to confront me or contacted me to be on her show.
Oh, really?
And yeah, I didn't even know at this point. I was on Facebook and I got all these I found all these big fan pages, which is the first time I ever did that. And then I started looking at all these stories and stuff, and that's when I got brave enough. Like right in January, I decided to, write a big thing about my story. And that very same day, I get a message from Linda, and I had when I was messaging her, I had to ask her, well, "What is a podcast?" 'Cause I didn't know what a podcast was.
Yeah.
I had no clue what a podcast was. So she explained to me what it was, and I said, "Okay, that sounds cool. I'll do an interview with you." And like I said, I did an interview, but I was very nervous, and it was like the day after. I was like, I wasn't preparing myself for the story, to speak out like that on being on a camera and stuff. So I was very nervous. I was kind of stuttering a lot, It was a tough deal, But now I found myself it's a lot easier because I've educated myself a lot more about Bigfoot, anyways, by watching all these YouTube videos and podcasts. I mean, hundreds of hours I've been spending on watching all this stuff, doing research.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was whenever I first started my podcast. I was real nervous about it, and same thing. I'd be stuttering, and right before the show, I'd have like so much anxiety. It was like, oh, should I cancel it? Should I do it? I'm so nervous. But
Oh, yeah.
I took a year off, and this is going to be the first episode for the new season. Again, I appreciate you coming on, and
Oh, yeah.
you know, just like you coming out with Bigfoot, we're known for UFO sightings, and on our page we have actual footage, videos, and this was happening in our house. Our house. I
Oh,
drive to the store, I see the same thing, and we have clear videos. I bought an expensive telescope. I put a camera on the lens. We're recording this stuff, and
yeah, I see that episode you got where you like UFO type stuff too,
yeah,
paranormal, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, and with that, I guess we could kind of tie in the Bigfoot with UFO sightings. I don't want to go too deep into the UFO thing, but I want to jump
Yeah.
in. I want to jump into the man in Ohio in 1977 who saw Bigfoot, and like I
Okay.
said, there's a lot of similarities in this. So in 1977, a guy named Millard Faber was out of the woods near the Huron River collecting moss. He saw a 8-foot creature with the hunched posture, just like you mentioned, no neck, dark hair all over his body, and two bright eyes. Didn't growl, didn't charge, didn't do anything except stare at him. And he mentions that when he was staring at him, he was looking him up and down like he was curious. So that's
Mhm.
what caught my attention. I was because I read your story, and then I'm over here doing this research, and I'm like, oh man, I was like, that's what happened to Curtis. And then so 36 hours later, he's asleep in his bed, and he has this someone's here feeling, and 5 glowing humanoids like glide through his bedroom door, and like one, I guess there's 5 of them, and 4 of them sit around him, and like the 5th one kind of like goes in the middle, right next to him, sits on a chair, and it's giving off this feeling to him, I guess like telepathically, like they're mad because he went to the news people and told a story about witnessing Bigfoot, and it actually came out. It was documented in the 70s in Awareness magazine by Veta L. Perry, and then I guess someone else told it, Zelia Edgar, and Just Another Tinfoil Hat presents. But just reading those similarities to what you're talking about, it can't be a coincidence. People from different places. You're in California. This dude's in Ohio. I had saw another story online. I saw the news article from, like, I guess the 1970s as well, And the same thing, like the way it walked, the way it arched down, the way it observed the person, like it's all the same. It can't be coincidence.
Yeah, it's definitely not coincidence. I mean, people just think that people are just out there just creating stories. The fact is that there's one common denominator in everybody's story. The description of the creature, pretty much almost every claim you see is just it's describing the same look, the same, the heights, the hairy body, the eyes, whatever. It's just everything's just too much the same. It's just as if say, well, everybody out there, those thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, whatever they're claimed up to this point, are just all just telling lies or whatever. But now you just have to look at the fact that there are people out there that do create stories, and there's also people that are just misidentifying what they saw. But and then you also got hundreds of thousands of people out there that have the stories, that are afraid to tell the stories because they don't want to be ridiculed, like myself. I held my story from telling just anybody, like people online right now, in 3 years. You see what I'm saying? Because I was afraid of being ridiculed, made fun, because I already experienced that even with the people I know.
Yeah.
And this is before I started watching all these other videos too. Like people are saying, even the people that have come forward at this point, because they feel comfortable, because we've been part of a family, being on the podcast and stuff, that we feel comfortable.
Yeah, my whole thing is, like whenever I first started getting into like UFOs or like studying, like the ancient knowledge, the forbidden knowledge, a lot of my friends and my family, they were like, I guess, kind of make fun of me and joke about it and this and that. But I mean, at the end of the day, I really don't care, because, it's my belief system. It's what I believe. And not only what I believe, what I saw with my own eyes, they didn't see it. I did, so I have my validation and I know my truth. So, now I'm not scared to talk about it. I'll talk about it all day.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, even believing and even if you know something, like in my situation, it's not even, to me, it's not even a matter of believing it, because I already know it exists, So it wouldn't matter me trying to believe somebody else, or even watching all these videos and stuff and say, well, yeah, there's something to it, So for me, to be able to see him and being standing face to face with him for 10 feet away, So yeah, I'm saying, I don't really care at this point now. Like people want to put people like me down, or whoever else that believes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of negativity out there.
Well, all right, Curtis, I really appreciate you coming on the show and telling your truth. I hope it encourages other witnesses like yourself to come out and speak out about these kind of topics. And to the listeners, you could catch Curtis Jones and his twin brother on the new season of Monster Quest on January 2nd on the History Channel. And don't forget, stay melted.
Melted. Tony Mars. Yeah. Broadcast. Yeah. Stay melted. Spoken.
Welcome to the Melted Broadcast, where the talk is lit. Microphone melted, but we never pull it off our lips. I'm flying high in my ship, skis never quit. Past the big dip, trying to get where I used to be.